The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry. And welcome back to another episode of It's Just Business. I am, of course, not Chris Larry. I am Steve. Chris has given us the dishonor of actually having a life over this weekend while we're recording, so we couldn't work it out. That's fine, but we have Alex, of course, who is our regular sub, who is sitting in for Alex. Alex, how are you?
Wait, I'm sitting in for Alex?
Oh, did I say that? You're sitting in for Chris. You're sitting in for Chris.
Okay, so I'm sitting in for Chris then. All right, so
this is what
do I need to grow my beard longer?
Yeah,
That's
you
my
do.
First question.
Yeah, you need to grow your beard longer, and and when you have a nonstop stream of babble like this, sometimes bad things come out. But but everybody knows Alex.
Yes,
the important thing
knows me. I'm back.
Yes,
sorry.
The important thing, though, is that we have a new member here at IJB, and that would be John Worrall.
Yo.
John. Now, if everybody out there recognizes the voice, it is because this is the former Kelly Worrall, who used to be on the Hogsty and was a founding member of the Hogsty. We're going by his real name, John, now, because we decided not to fool the audience any longer. So, John, a hearty welcome back to the Hogsty family.
It's really good to be back. I appreciate being on the show. And I guess if Alex is, I suppose, Steve, you're subbing for Chris as the host. Alex is then subbing for you. So I'm here to sub for Alex.
Okay, there we go.
I guess that's probably it. That's probably it.
All right.
All right. We're good. Happy to help that way.
Yeah, and so we actually have no one who's are doing their real roles on the show here. And believe me, hosting is not my thing. So if this show really sucks, hey, blame it on me. Please keep listening, but blame it on me.
Steve, anytime a show sucks, I blame it on you.
I blame all my problems on you, Steve.
I'm at this point in my life, I'm used to it. It's everybody blames me for everything. Woe's me. It's so awful.
Sure, that's how we became friends in the first place. So
that is exactly right. Actually, that is literally exactly right.
Yeah. That's how the whole podcast started.
That's exactly how it started.
Yeah, but John and I were the whipping boys.
We were.
We kind of bonded over
we were that. We were at the front of the line.
Yeah, but you see, I kind of enjoy being the contrarian, as you guys know, and so it kind of makes me happy to make other people mad.
Yes, we know that from your years and years of posting on blogs.
I enjoy making people mad on the air, too, but there's nothing they can do about it but yell at me on Twitter, so that's fine.
Right.
All right.
It's true.
Let's see. So we're doing IJB here. We're doing this on the eve of the Dallas game, so our minds are possibly elsewhere, but that's okay. We've got great stories here for you, of course, as we always do. And we're going to start with an update of a story we covered, 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago. And this was the USA Gymnastics story. And we touched on this briefly before with the Larry Nassar trial, but what's really gone on this past week is that USA Gymnastics is just in volcano-style meltdown now. And so this is the story. And now let me just back up and give everybody kind of the background in case you've forgotten. Larry Nassar, who is the scummy doctor who was accused of abusing literally hundreds of gymnasts in the USA Gymnastics program. He pled guilty in July 11, 2017 in federal court to possession of child pornography, sentenced to 60 years in federal court. Then he pled guilty to 7 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct with a minor in Ingham County, Michigan, and including 3 of them under 13, incidentally, which there's got to be a special place in hell for that. The very public statements of all the abused women occurred during the sentencing phase of that case. And he was eventually sentenced to 40 to 175 years for that. And then In February of 2018, he pled guilty to another 3 counts of criminal sexual assault, sentenced to another 40 to 125 years. All of that was set up by those 3 courts to serve concurrently, meaning that once he finishes with the 60-year federal sentence, then he starts the Ingham County, then he starts at Eaton County. So there's 0 chance he's ever going to get out of jail.
Even with good behavior, he's in jail for life.
Yeah, I mean, he could get theoretically paroled, say, from the federal case or win an appeal. Even if that happens, and he's got 2 straight,
get slammed in for something else.
Yeah. So there's 0 chance he's ever going to...
He is done.
Yeah, he's done. Okay, but so that's just the background. So the setup here is that this week has been an especially bad one for USA Gymnastics. In the beginning here, when all this went down, the former president of USA Gymnastics was a guy named Steve Penny. He resigned. Well, Mr. Penny has since gotten himself in legal trouble of his own, of course, because why not? Let's just do this the complete wrong way. He was arrested on a charge of tampering with evidence during the investigation into the Larry Nassar event. So now he's about to be tried and go to jail himself.
So he tampered with evidence, but obviously not very good at tampering with evidence.
Well, he might have been good at tampering at evidence. He just wasn't good at not getting caught.
Wow.
And presumably the evidence would have showed that he knew about Nassar, I would assume. And
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and that's presumably what he's trying to cover up. And so the end of the game here is that the new president, whose name was Mary Bono, resigned after just a week. And so now she's out. Now USA Gymnastics is back to having no leadership and a ton of abused women, many of whom are still out in front of the media.
Right.
And so what I'm wondering here is this. Given this disaster, normally you would, if this was a private company, you would say, you know what, we probably need to close up shop and end business.
Yeah, file bankruptcy, start over.
Yeah, or just stop it, period. But this is an Olympic sport. So where do we go from here? That's the big question. Thoughts?
So my initial thought is there's so much abuse that happens in schools, that happens in youth sports, that happens in I was abused in school. I know a lot of people who are survivors of sexual abuse, and I think that it's somewhere fundamentally we have to, as a nation, say we need to stop this business of putting children alone with adults who are not their parents. I honestly think so. I get that gymnastics, the gymnasts are better when they're 12, 13, 14 years old. There's a lot of coaching. There's a ton of pressure, and somehow. I think that that's at the heart of all of this. These kids will do anything to make the team. They're not going to do anything to jeopardize that. And they're not in a position to really understand the difference of what's okay and what's not okay. I think that the problem is that you're putting them alone with adults who have the potential to do anything that they want.
The problem is, like, I had a kid who played baseball at a very, very, very high level. For when he was this age. And, all these programs are just set up so that these teams travel and you do spend time with the coaches on the road and, all this stuff. I don't know how you get around it, except the parents being there. And, and his mom was always there. I was always there, or some family member was always there in our case. But in some cases, that doesn't happen. So I don't know how you get around the concept of kid being alone with coach when you're talking about some of these big national travel teams.
Well, I think one part of it starts with, having maybe a second coach always involved, an assistant. You don't just meet one-on-one with these coaches, just have more than one. That in itself, 2 people, something's less likely to happen. It does come down to the parents always, like you guys are saying. The parents have to be involved, and I don't care if this might be your meal ticket. You got to be there every day for your kid in something like this. Yeah,
I mean, and of course, the bigger question to me, which is why I think it's a good business question, is what happens to the USA Gymnastics program? I mean, what do you do? If I had a daughter, which I don't, who was at this level of gymnastics, I'm not sure I'd want to put her in this program right now. And so what does the United States do? Because it's a major Olympic sport and a major revenue generator. in terms of Olympic ratings.
I think that what they need to do is step back and say we kind of need to suspend what we're doing until we can put a framework in place that keeps the children safe. If they don't know how they're going to protect these children, they can't run sport. They've shown that. So, I think that until, some kind of an independent party says, all right, we've reviewed your practices and we agree that your practices will now protect the children. Until something like that happens, I don't think that we have gymnastics.
Well, and now USA Gymnastics is overseen by the U.S. Olympic Committee, right?
Yeah, which is chartered by Congress.
Right. So, I mean, I know you're on the conservative side of things, Steve, but I think Congress might need to step up here and, get involved.
Well, and listen, I'm on the conservative side of things politically, but that doesn't mean I think the government needs to do nothing. I think both of you are right in that I think some things are more important than the money that's coming from the ratings, which is ultimately all this is about. And if there's one constant theme on this show, that we've preached over, this is episode 40, it's that money always rules everything. It's a cynical way to look at it, but it's just the truth. When it comes to sports, money is always the most important thing. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what this is about is that people are making a lot of money on Olympic Games. And ratings and merchandising. Well, and so, but some things are more important than that.
Right. And I think that's the other kind of overarching theme that you've had in this show for the last year or two. It's, money rules everything, but it's become at the expense of, people's morality, the rape culture in college sports, all this stuff that we've been overlooking for generations now, all in the name of the dollar. It's not worth it. Yeah,
I mean, and I wrote a column on the Hog Side, as a matter of fact, that was advocating for the death penalty for Michigan State athletics as a result of this. And, of course, nothing happened. We knew nothing was going to happen.
Right.
It was me.
But we talked about that with Penn State. We talked about it with Baylor.
Yeah, and nothing happened with any of it. And Baylor's pending, we'll see. But, I'd bet my house that Baylor isn't getting the death penalty.
So the question is, how many more Baylors, how many more Michigan States, how many more U.S. Gymnastics are there going to be? And that I don't know what the answer is, but
infinity.
Over the years, I've become very cynical to the idea that anyone's actually going to do anything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the problem. If there was ever a program that deserved to be shut down, it's this USA Gymnastics program. It truly is. And Bella Caroli's ranch, which is north of the city of Houston, is the training center. And this is where, all this abuse or some of this abuse took place. And that's just a house of horrors. I don't know how you could ask anybody to go there, at all. So personally, if it were me, I would advocate just ceasing the program for now. There probably needs to be a congressional investigation, run by the House of Representatives.
Yeah,
that probably needs to happen. And the USA Olympic Committee isn't innocent of this. That they failed to oversee this program appropriately.
I'm surprised they haven't had more blowback in terms of resignations and stuff after this.
Oh, people will resign when it gets to them. There are two things that strike me right now. The first thing is that I'm kind of blown away that Steve and I are on the same side of any issue.
I know.
Anyone who's followed the Hogstein knows this does not happen. So Steve and I are in lockstep here. Of bromance is forming, and then the second thing that struck me is the only way that these things ever change is if is through boycott. If you take away the money aspect of it, if people boycott the U.S. Olympics or USA Gymnastics, which I just feel like probably that they have too strong a hold on American culture for there to be a boycott that would have any kind of impact. But, that's the only thing that I've ever seen that makes a difference is when people start taking the dollars away.
Yeah, and of course we know that's not going to happen.
I've been boycotting gymnastics for 35 years.
So long since I've even done a somersault.
I tried to do a somersault this morning in prep for this show, and it didn't go well. Now there's a hole in my wall here.
No, I think I've suddenly realized after just turning 35, there are a lot of things I suddenly cannot do athletically.
Yeah, you're going to start understanding us here pretty soon.
Yeah.
And Alex, believe me, you weren't exactly Carl Lewis in your heyday either.
No.
Okay, but okay. So I think we're all in agreement here that what probably the moral thing to do is probably just to shut down the program and start over completely. And if that means they have to miss an Olympic cycle, so be it. Now, is the U.S. Summer Olympics? I forgot. Are they was the last one in 2016 or 18? Somebody help me.
16 it should be.
Okay, so they've got 2 years to rebuild the program, theoretically. We all also know that what are the chances of that? Probably unlikely. But that's probably what should happen. I don't know. I mean, I think even the parents who mean well for their kids are going to get sucked into the idea of, we've changed and there's new leadership and it'll be fine, trust me.
And this leader will last more than 4 days, trust us.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I think
4 days, you don't even get your email address updated,
No, yeah, I don't know. And the story behind why she resigned isn't really apparent. By the way, in case anybody was wondering, she was there and then she resigned, and sort of without explanation. So
no, she actually released a statement around why she resigned. So she resigned because she tweeted out a video of her marking out her Nike logo on her golf shoe, which was in protest to Nike's Colin Kaepernick ad.
See, I saw she did that. Is that why she resigned?
That's why she resigned. Yeah, there's a statement that's out there. You can find it on the internet. So that so she did that, and what's very interesting is that she was exercising her First Amendment rights to free speech in doing that, which is exactly what Colin Kaepernick was doing. So between the two of them, they have both now sacrificed plenty. So what she said was that I think the Nike ad said that when you're willing to sacrifice everything for your principles or something along those lines, and she felt that was offensive because she felt that the people who sacrificed their lives in war made the ultimate sacrifice, not Colin Kaepernick.
And I'll just tell you, John, that the worst argument we ever had on that show was about that incident, so we don't want to go quite down that road.
We don't
again.
have to get into it.
It was to the point where I had to edit out 2 minutes of the show before publication.
Probably a good idea.
And so that's why she resigned, and my response to that would be, say whatever you want, but there's consequences, in the business world if you do. And that's probably what I'm sure Nike was a sponsor of probably of U.S. Olympics. And that's why she had to resign.
That begs the question then, did nobody vet this promotion beforehand?
This is an organization that let somebody abuse hundreds of women. Do you think that they vetted?
So no.
Yeah.
No. So they didn't. So after that, they still haven't hired an HR department. Basically, is what you're telling me.
Well, yeah, exactly.
So she wasn't promoted. She was actually, oddly enough, she was brought in. She was she's a former congresswoman. And then she was brought in to run the U.S. gymnastics, but she was working.
That's a terrible plan. Why would you ever have a congressperson run anything?
To work for the same law firm that was helping cover up the sexual abuse. So it was a bad decision from the get-go.
This might be the dumbest hire I've ever heard of.
It gets worse and worse the further you dig into it. It's not worth it.
It's just nothing. There's nothing good. Tell me again why USA Gymnastics is still operating. My God. Yeah. All right.
They could literally have just gone find a homeless person who was a better choice.
It would get somebody off the street. That homeless person could afford a house, an apartment. He would do just as good a job as these two have done. So it can't get literally can't get worse. So short of
just
murder,
anybody.
Short of murder, that's about the only thing left. That can get worse. Well, let's move on to something more fun and interesting than that disaster, and that is the idea that the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, whose name is Shahid Khans, who goes by Shad, at least in the media he does, has been trying to buy Wembley Stadium in London for a year now.
Right.
And just very recently this week withdrew his bid. Now that could be for a lot of things. It could be for due diligence. Didn't like the financials. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you why he said he did it.
Go ahead.
So the reason he said there was a lot of backlash in England. So the Football Association which in normal places you would expect it to be the English Football Association or the British Football.
Right.
But since they were the first one, they just named themselves the Football Association and let everybody else name themselves the American Football. It was a genius move. We are the Football Association. Right. So they own Wembley Stadium, and they own a bunch of stadiums throughout England. And when it was announced that they were looking at selling Wembley, people went bananas. They know this is part of our history. This is a national treasure. You can't sell Wembley. It's blah, 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 blah. So 2/3 of the people who were sort of polled about this came out strongly against. And so I think, so what his statement was, and to Steve's point, why he did it, I don't know. Why he said he did it was because he felt like it was just going to cause too much of a ruckus, and he didn't want to disturb things.
And from someone who's in business, let me tell you that if there's if there are millions and millions and millions of dollars to be made, most people are willing to cause a ruckus, for that kind of money. But here's, I think, the interesting point. And by the way, when John says football, what he means is soccer.
Right.
In American parlance, just to be clear.
My wife is English, so I get confused.
Okay. And, and my idea would be, just put a bunch of cots out there in the middle of the stadium so people can sleep instead of watching a soccer game because it's so boring. But I think the more interesting thing to me here with this is that why is the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars doing anything with Wembley Stadium? Does that strike anybody as a little bit odd, particularly with a team that has historically had trouble filling their seats? Is in a low rent, low income stadium in Jacksonville? Alex?
Well, I mean, we all know that the rumors have been out there that the Jaguars will eventually move to London, so it's not weird from that perspective. This was what everyone kind of has been speculating, that he would buy the stadium. Eventually, the Jaguars would move there. But, I mean, other NFL owners own parts of soccer franchises in the UK and around the world.
They're not buying one of the biggest stadiums in the world, though.
No, but stadiums are the big money thing now. I mean, you look at what's going on in L.A. and in Las Vegas. Stadiums are where the money's at this point.
So to be clear as well, so that it's out there, Shahid Khan, who, for reasons unknown, does not go by Shaka Khan. Shahid Khan is also the owner and the chairman of Fulham FC, which is a soccer team in the Premier League. So he has interests over there that would warrant buying stadiums as well. It's not just an NFL guy.
But why wouldn't he buy their stadium? That's the other question.
Probably already owns it.
Oh, well, okay.
My guess.
Well, but let's just address this though. To me, the obvious setup was move Jacksonville to London. And I don't know if we've ever talked about this on this show. I don't. If we have, it's been only briefly. I'm not sure the NFL wants to be in. I know the NFL wants to be in London. I'm not sure it's a great idea for the NFL to move to London. I really don't. And I don't know how logistically how it could possibly be done in a way that's equitable to all the teams. I don't know if the market is truly there in London. I mean, they're going to fill up the stands more or less when we bring 4 games, 2, 3, 4 games a year over there as an exhibition because they're played in Wembley Stadium. When they go, but at the heart of it, England's a soccer country, and I don't know how you have. I mean, what division is the London team going to be in, and how on earth do you make like the Seattle Seahawks fly 10 hours and with a 7-hour time difference, and have that be equitable? To the visiting team.
Logistically, it's a terrible plan, but as you've pointed out many a time, the NFL doesn't care.
No.
Yeah. The NFL doesn't care about safety. It doesn't care about logistics. It just cares about the ROI. So, I think it all comes down to that for them.
Oh, of course it does. I mean, it's always about money. Like you said, and like I've said a million times, none of this stuff matters. The only thing that matters is money. That's the whole safety thing in the NFL is only about money. The concussion lawsuit is only about money. It's always about money. I just don't think that the market is going to be there to support a London team.
I can speak. I can speak to that a little bit because I've got a brother-in-law who is a diehard Denver Broncos fan who lives in up near Birmingham.
Okay, And by
care where he
not
lives.
not Birmingham,
not
Alabama,
Alabama.
Birmingham,
The original
yeah.
Birmingham.
the Birmingham 1, V1. So what I can tell you is sort of the same way when the United States had the North American Soccer League, and that folded out. That washed out, flamed out. And then a couple decades later, they gave it another run with MLS. And then MLS was doing well enough that they brought the North American Soccer League back as a minor league soccer league here. Now, MLS is not making tons of money, but it has a foothold now. And so where I can tell you where the NFL fan base is in England right now is at that stage where the fans they have are hardcore, sort of the same way that nobody really thought soccer would take off, but you had this pocket of people that were diehard about soccer that were going to keep pushing.
50,000, 20,000 people in every city.
That's right.
Yeah.
The other thing to think about in terms of England is that it's small. Like England is smaller than California. So you put a team there, you have a fairly financially strong country that the whole country is into that team. So you can draw people, and you can get anywhere in a day. It doesn't take any time to get any place. So I think that they're right at that cusp where they feel like they've got a strong, viable core market, and they want to figure out ways to expand upon that. And so that the NFL Europe didn't work sort of the same way North American Soccer League didn't work in the 70s. But they're going to keep coming back because the dollars are there and the people want to spend them.
Yeah, the one interesting thing about that is the NFL Europe only worked in one country, and that was Germany. Every other, it failed miserably in London first and foremost.
Also, the dollars.
Well, and also remember,
dollars are pounds. That's my mistake.
Well, yeah, and remember though, the NFL Europe, of course, was basically a minor league.
Yes.
And it wasn't the preeminent. They did not have preeminent talent. Presumably, the North American Soccer League and now MLS has got the preeminent talent, or most of it at least, in the United States. I realize that some of the big guys go to Europe, and play, but in terms of the United States, it's the preeminent soccer league in the United States, and they do have probably, I would assume, at least the bulk of the American talent, whereas the bulk of the American football, all of the American football talent was in the NFL, not NFL Europe.
Right.
And so presumably if you put, I don't know, Blake Bortles, and company over in London, the idea would be, this is the league
then you're
talent.
not going to have the best American talent.
Yeah, you may have a former quarterback. Yeah, you may have a guy who's washing cars for a living. If you send Blake Bortles over there, no, I get it. But and so I think, John, what you're saying is there's an audience. It's just a small audience, but it's passionate. And so, do they have enough to start with and not lose money for a while until they grow? Is that your point?
Yeah, and I think that they do. I think it's close. Which if it was obvious, they'd have done it, right? But I think that it's speculative at this point. And I think that they could pull it off, but I mean, they would really be doing a disservice to the NFL teams by doing it if they're going to try to have them in the same league. Just the logistics, the travel. I've made that flight quite a number of times. It sucks. It's a little better if you go through Iceland because Iceland Air is a cool airline. I don't get paid to say that, but
no. We hopefully Iceland Air, if you're listening, pay us.
Yeah, Iceland Air. I live in Maryland. So at any rate, it's I think that it's worth them taking a look, but I can't figure out a way that they can do that isn't an obvious slap in the face to NFL players.
Well, I'll tell you what I think is the answer long term is if you build enough of a foothold in Europe for American football, then you have a European division. And you have 4 teams in London, Berlin, Paris, and, I don't know where else, maybe Madrid, somewhere.
Barcelona.
Yeah.
Yeah,
bring back the Barcelona Dragons. That's
right.
what we need.
Yeah,
to do.
We need.
I think that's the only way to make it
with
equitable.
those crazy ass helmets.
Team in Sicily somehow.
Who knows? But at the long term, that's probably, I would assume, the goal. From the NFL, if you gave them true serum, they would probably tell you that they want an international division.
I've heard this before about not just the NFL, other sports, how repeatedly large corporations go to these sports leagues and say, hey, you got to go global. But the logistics of doing it in sports is just so difficult. Like I heard about something. This is 10 years ago. Somebody told me a story how they had read something where somebody was proposing putting like 5 teams for baseball in Asia, 5 in Europe, and just creating some weird global league like that.
Yeah. Let's fly 15 hours for a 3-game series.
Right. There is one other solution that we haven't talked about, which is, but it would fundamentally change the structure of the way that the NFL plays. So the only acceptable, viable global sports are sports like tennis or golf, where the game moves around the globe. So if everybody goes and plays in Europe, it's not a disadvantage to everybody. If everybody goes and plays a game in Japan, then that works, right? So if you say, okay, here's what our league looks like, and we're going to have a bunch of teams go play, at once, then that works.
How about this? This would take 15 years to get done, but you turn the Super Bowl into a truly world championship. You have the AFC and the NFC fight it off for an American championship, and then you have the European League,
the EFC.
The EFC have their champion, and then the Super Bowl game is the American versus the European League. That would be a way to do it, and then just the European League plays the European League and stays there, and then we have our league, and then at the end they come together.
Like you said, that would take a whole generation to build up a second league.
But it's not dissimilar from the way that they do soccer over in Europe, right? You've got an Italian league, you've got a Spanish league, you've got an English league, you've got Bundesliga, all of these things, and then even within these, Italy has Serie A, Serie B, and then you have Champions Cup. So all the people that win these things then are going to play a tournament against each other and try to come up. But they don't care about that as much as they care about their local cup. Probably because the odds of winning it are lower than odds of winning it.
It's kind of like the SEC fans who care more about winning the SEC than something like a bowl game.
Sort of how the Redskins care more about getting into the playoffs than anything beyond that, fantasy. Yeah.
Well, I think all the Redskins are pleading for is competence at this point. Let's not dream big.
Aim high.
The other thing is that what soccer does that is at least somewhat relevant is they do play international games. Some European teams do travel to the United States for games and stuff, but that's not. Those are what they call friendlies, which is something that is basically an exhibition game, and it's not done in a league setting.
That in the NFL because of the violence of the sport.
No, you can't do friendlies, in the NFL. Right. But my point is, they come over here and they'll play a couple games around the United States for a few weeks, and they go back. It's not in like a league setting where there's regularly scheduled games. So that wouldn't be a good model.
It kind of brings up another point too, which is, if the NFL is trying to grow the sport, right? If they want to go into Europe, if they'd like to capture an Asian market or whatever, they have to address the problem that right now at the youth level, the sport's on the decline rather than on the growth, right? You've got, schools pulling their football program. There's, CTE is a real thing. They have to solve that problem before they look at trying to grow the league, in my opinion.
I think you're right.
Well, how do you do that?
I don't know.
I mean, I think a lot of it is just hand-wringing parents who are getting caught up in the media crush of this stuff. The truth of the matter is, in the NFL at that level and at the D1 level in college, people get hurt. But the truth of the matter is that the Pee Wee League, not a lot of kids are getting hurt. It's a much smaller percentage. I don't think the game is unsafe at that level. I think they're making it safer every day. Again, all because they're trying to make money at it, not because they care about the players. But the equipment is better. The rules are better. I don't think that it's nearly as unsafe as some of these hand-wringing mom and dads out there really think.
Well, I would also point out that, even though there is this decline in youth participation, it's not like there isn't the CFL out there, the XFL coming back in 2020, this other Alliance for American Football, about 100 different arena football teams. There's plenty, it's not going to be NFL-level talent, obviously, but there's plenty of other talent out there that you could develop a European league around.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, I mean, yeah, the ratings have been, down for a variety of reasons, which we've addressed on this show. But it's just kind of like saying the Beatles are a bit less popular,
Right.
because the NFL is number one by far still in the United States. Yeah, by far. Yes, it's less popular, less they have more problems, but it's not like all of a sudden, we've gone from the Beatles to, I don't know, Three Doors Down.
Right.
We haven't got to that point.
Oh my goodness.
My apologies for the Three Doors Downs fans out there.
Yeah,
I just
both
saw
of you.
I cruised I cruised through their website a couple weeks ago. That's what they were on my head.
That's a weird one.
I was like sitting there going, I wonder if Three Doors Down is really touring anymore.
So everybody,
turns out they are.
Everybody listening, you just got a glimpse into the browser history of Steve. May I recommend that you leave your glimpse just at that.
So, yeah, I mean, I wonder if the Three Doors Down lead singer is the one who manages their website at this point.
It might be the case. Yeah, it was one of those weird things. I was sitting here going, "Are they touring? Gosh, do they exist?" And sure enough, they do. Okay, so let's move on. I think we've exhausted international football. Yeah, and when we're talking about Three Doors Down,
the good name of Three Doors Down.
Hey, they have good music. I'm all about Three Doors Down.
I mean, that was the generation of rock and roll I was stuck with in the 90s.
I was stuck with the Doors, which was a way better door band than Three Doors Down was.
Hey, I'm convinced
There's
this
no
day
definitive number of doors in there.
I'm convinced to this day that Jim Morrison is alive and kicking somewhere, high on heroin in some bathhouse.
He was, but the odds of him making it this far are diminishing.
That's probably true. Probably true. Okay, so the last thing we want to talk about here today before we clock out is, we've talked a lot about ESPN on this show over the past couple years and all the foibles they've had and all the problems and all of that. What we've never really addressed is that FS1, which is the Fox Sports 1 network run by Fox, has always been kind of a pimple on the butt of sports, but recently they've really built up. They've started to acquire a lot of talent. Mm-hmm. They have the Major League Baseball playoffs, which ESPN does not have, and they've brought they brought Skip Bayless's show, which is just horrible, but it gets ratings. That is over there. They've hired away a lot of NFL talent. Chris Carter's over there to be an analyst. There's a lot of the talking head shows all day long like ESPN had. So what I'm wondering here is it possible that FS1 replaces ESPN as the preeminent sports network given all the problems ESPN's having? Thoughts?
I think that it can. So, Steve, you and I will remember a time when Fox Network was a pimple on the sports dominance of NBC, ABC, and CBS. And then Fox came in, and that's really where it was that, and then The Simpsons. And then suddenly they were a real deal. And then ESPN came and messed everybody up. I do think so. Here, there's a challenge I think that all of these media company are facing right now, which is us. So, and when I say that, I haven't had cable television in years. I had satellite for a while when I couldn't get the Redskins on an antenna. But now that I can get the Redskins on an antenna, I'm not spending fucking $80, $90 a month to watch.
$80, $90 a month, son. You have no idea how much it really costs.
However much it is anymore. I don't know.
A lot more than that.
I dropped $40 on an antenna. I've got a handful of, I have PlayStation View, I have Netflix, I have Amazon Prime. I have some services that allow me to see things without having to buy a bunch of crap television. So I really don't know how the networks that have relied upon television viewership for decades, they need to pivot massively in order to figure out how they're going to compete with a market where people are able to create and distribute content for free as they like.
Yeah. And, ESPN, I give them credit. They probably are ahead still of Fox and CBS in that regard. CBS is pretty good. in terms of their online live streaming of sporting events if you're willing to pay for it.
And CBS has their CBS Sports Network also. It's just not nearly as prominent as the Fox
and
Network.
NBC,
and ESPN.
for some reason, got rid of Comcast Sports and made it NBC Sports. And it's chugging along at the local level, I think, much better than any of them.
Yeah, they have no major national. I think they have hockey, the NHL, if I recall, and that's about it.
But their model, I think, is probably a smart one in that they buy a lot of local programming. You know, they'll buy, like, in DC, they own the rights to the Wizards and the Caps, which is, that's a smart way to do it. If you do that in 20 major cities, you have a viable network for a long time.
I mean, first of all, I'm embarrassed. Yeah. I'm embarrassed to say how much I pay for cable a month because it's an obscene amount of money. But I guess I'm probably an anachronism in that regard, because that's just, I enjoy being an anachronism, and a contrarian. And so I'll just continue to do it just because, most likely. But I think what you guys are saying is a valid point. And Chris Larry, if he were here, would say this. He said it on the show that he's like you, John. He's got all these different, things he subscribes to.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I stopped 2 years ago paying for cable.
I have cable and I have network cable, and that's how I roll. But I think most people are probably there still, for sure. But the market is shrinking. But I don't know if that FS1 can operate in the mediums that you two are going to access exactly the same way as other networks can. So that's not going to stop anybody.
So, they all can. So the big challenge is that they, do they have content that's appealing? Because what's happening is we're going through the days, back to date Steve and I again, of there being 3 networks, where you watched everything. And you're big. If you wanted to learn about other things, you had to watch Wide World of Sports because that was the only show that was going to get you out of your major sports leagues. But
which would fail miserably in today's environment.
Which would fail miserably in today's environment. Yeah. That's right. But a YouTube video of the agony of defeat would win you millions. So going from 3 choices to now virtually infinite choices. The consumer has the option of a la carte. I only want to follow these teams. I only care about the local feeds for those teams. We have a challenge right now in that it's still difficult. Like if I was from Denver and I moved to Maryland, it's still hard for me to really get quality Denver programming in some ways. Most radio stations now have a URL that you can go to catch radio content. Yeah. That's good. There's podcasts, but the TV, being able to watch the Broncos, the NFL is still very tight about out of market programming. You have
all
to spend
4 of the major sports leagues are still, and it's probably mostly due to their TV contracts that they have to be tight about it. But
actually, it's just the NFL really, because Major League, I purchased the Major League Baseball extra innings package this year, which is on. I have I have Comcast.
They all have that
Xfinity.
except for the NFL, right?
Yeah, and so that allowed me to get every baseball team in every market, all the local broadcasts, and I watch my Dodgers,
right.
And the NBA does that too, and I think both the NBA and the NFL have online streaming only, packages you could buy. I just bought the TV one because again, I'm an anachronism, but the NFL does not do that because I would guess that the TV contracts with Fox, NBC, CBS, and ESPN probably prevent that.
Right.
Because there's many billions of dollars.
But the NFL is also going the Twitter, Facebook route. We should acknowledge that as well.
Yes, they are.
So, Alex, just because I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean by that?
I mean that they make a deal with who was it? This year it's Amazon. They have a deal to put games on Amazon live streaming.
Games are on Amazon.
Right, and then they made a deal also with Twitter to have a couple live streams.
Yeah, Twitter has had a couple games also. Yeah. So presumably the next TV contract or the next media rights broadcast contracts when they come up in a couple years will include that.
I need to rant one quick second because I was out of market for many years. I took this job partly because it was in market. You guys know I've lived everywhere. The thing that pisses me off is that if I wanted to watch the Redskins, I not only have to pay $300 a year for Sunday ticket, I also have to pay for DirecTV in order to get Sunday ticket, which
is one of the worst of all
which
of
is
them.
terrible. unless I can prove that I can't get DirecTV, at which point so they have the technology, but but the deal with DirecTV and AT&T is different. And then the damnedest thing about it is, I'm doing that. I don't have cable because I got this instead, and then they don't show the Redskins games if they get flexed out. Into so when the Redskins were doing well, we're making a run for the playoff, 2012, for example. Suddenly we're playing prime time all the time, and then Sunday Ticket doesn't have those. I have to now go find some place with regular television. It was awful. The whole thing was just a terrible experience. But they know full damn well that I'm not going to leave football over it, so they don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what can you say? You're exactly right with all that stuff. And I mean, and as it relates to FS1, at some point, I think if they're going to make a jump, they'll have to bid in for the NFL games. I think that's the only way that they become, they'll need to, like, that's how you brought up Fox in the beginning, 30 years ago, how Fox became prominent was, one, The Simpsons, and two, they got the NFC package for the NFL, and those two things vaulted Fox into prominence. And FS1 can hire all the Shannon Sharps they want, know, but at the end of the day, they won't become major players like ESPN until they outbid ESPN.
Well, and on the same time, we've also talked about how ESPN is kind of in massive debt because they've overbid on so many different sports items.
You guys, neither two of you might not have heard the episode, but I read, I don't know, 6 months ago, I brought the list and read out all of the money they've bid in for all these sports, and it's an obscene amount of money.
And they're bidding obscene amounts of money on things that you shouldn't be bidding obscene amounts of money on. Like, women, WNBA should not be getting, billion-dollar contracts.
Their whole contract is $25 million, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
that one was. But there were some in there that are just absurd how much they're paying for something.
Oh yeah, the WNBA is not one of. We did an episode on this too. I mean, anybody who thinks that the WNBA is prominent, just look at the multi-billion-dollar NBA contract versus the $25 million WNBA contract, which is worth less than LeBron James' salary every year, and then that's how you know where the sport is.
Yeah.
But point is, reason why I wanted to bring it up is that, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to identify the channel that FS1 was on, and now I'm watching National League Championship game series on it. So they're building up, and they have a couple Skip Bayless types who, again, as abhorrent a human being as he is, he has audience. They're building it, and they're actually getting to the point where I think they can compete.
Too, right?
Yeah, they have Colin Cowherd. They've got Clay Travis, in the morning on Fox Radio. So they're getting to they're slowly competing. They're slowly building to the point where they're becoming, I think, a legitimate competitor to ESPN, and they're the first and only ones who've ever really competed with ESPN.
Well, I did read up because I thought we were going to talk more about just raw ratings numbers. Their goal is really not to go after ESPN yet; it's to go after ESPN 2.
Yeah,
and
they're doing
3.
that, I think.
And they're doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just it's sort of an incremental steps, and they're just building it in a way that I find smart, and they haven't spent the just obscene amount of money that ESPN has on all these contracts.
Right,
because
they gotta be
ESPN
smart. Don't give $1 billion to like ice dancing or something.
Yeah, because ESPN is hemorrhaging money. We all know that. And just this week, as a matter of fact, the new president of ESPN acknowledged all of this. Because if you go backwards and remember that John Skipper is the longtime president of ESPN, he resigned. Allegedly because he had a drug addiction,
right?
And who knows? Maybe he did. Maybe who knows what the truth is? But what a lot of people didn't like about John Skipper is he was leading ESPN down kind of a political path in terms of the content they were providing, and they were getting criticized for it. The new president of ESPN acknowledged just this week that was the wrong path, and that he wants to steer them back more towards sports. I have to think that you don't hear political talk on Fox. On FS1,
not on FS1, no.
No, that's why. I didn't mean Fox News. I mean FS1, not Fox. Obviously, Fox has a news channel.
Was Skipper the guy that put Rush Limbaugh on ESPN?
I don't know.
He would have been around back then, I think.
I don't know if Skipper was around that long, but yeah, that would be an example of going political.
Yeah,
that
was a terrible idea.
It flamed out in like a month.
No, it didn't take long.
Yeah, it didn't take long. But I think FS1 is doing it right, and so we'll see what happens in the coming years. Again, I think to compete they'll probably have to get an NFL package.
To answer your original question, see, I do think that they'll compete with ESPN. I think that Fox, while I disagree with them politically, and I think their news is largely crap, would apologize to my friend Molly, who is a newscaster for them. I think they do sports very well. I think that they're very smart and that they're very good at running a media network. So I think that they're going to do well.
Okay, and with that, I think we will call it a show. We have, I think, exhausted the topics. John, I'd like to thank you for coming on. Hopefully this will be, if you've had fun, maybe you didn't, maybe you're hating life right now talking about sports right now. Hopefully you're not. Hopefully you'll continue on with us. And Alex, as a fill-in, as always, you're number one in our hearts.
Yeah, number one in your hearts, number 4 on the depth chart.
Number 2 in your pants.
Oh, my goodness. Alex, where can they find you on social media if they so desire?
I don't know why you'd want to, but Alex35332 on Twitter.
You'll find a bunch of neat GIFs and stuff if you follow him.
Yeah, I occasionally do something stupid.
John, where are you?
The hell if
you're anywhere.
I'm pretty sure if you went to jworrall73, that's JWORRALL 73 on Twitter, that you'll find me, but that might be wrong, so I apologize to whoever the hell has that Twitter handle. Sorry, dude.
John just read out a random Twitter handle, so that's very apropos.
I should probably figure that out.
All right, and as you guys know, I am not on Twitter myself, so please don't try and find me, but you can find me most of the time at the Hogsty. And with that, we will see you in another 2 weeks.